We know the FBI made an announcement. They've arrested 4 alleged members of what they're calling a radical pro-Palestinian group accused of plotting New Year's Eve bombings in Los Angeles. Many different places. They're alleged planning coordinated bombing attacks again on New Year's Eve, targeting 5 separate locations across Los Angeles. Our hope here is that this is moving in a positive direction, though, that our FBI was on top of it.
These 4 were arrested, as well as there was a 5th individual that they believe could be connected to the same radical group that was arrested in New Orleans that was allegedly planning a separate attack. So the FBI here, it appears, has thwarted 2 separate New Year's Eve attacks, and they tie it back to a radical pro-Palestinian extremist group.
This investigation was initiated in part due to the September 2025 executive order signed by President Trump to root out left-wing domestic terror organizations in our country, such as Antifa and other radical groups like the Turtle Island Liberation Front. As the president made clear, recent attacks across the country have highlighted the grave threats posed by these far-left domestic terror groups. These threats are sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, threats, and violence designed to silence opposing speech, limit political activity, and direct policy outcomes, and prevent the proper functioning of a democratic society.
That is what we've seen over the past few years, is that pro-Palestinian, the left has found a common cause with radical Islam. So the same groups that are committing terror are
Puerto
doing
Rico,
it.
Free Hawaii, but they've now first on their list is Free Palestine. So in fact, the whole name is based off an indigenous name of the United States that they believe the American imperialism must be taken down. So from these arrests, I think what will be interesting to see is that these will not probably be the usual faces of what you think of as Islamic terrorism, because as what Will said, you've seen the convergence. They will come for Jews first, always. It's an easier target. Israel's 8 million people, much smaller military, surrounded by what used to be mostly hostile governments. Now, actually, thankfully, with Egypt more, but still a lot of radicals within that they're even having to deal with inside Muslim majority countries. But who do they go to right away next? It's us. It's America, and it's predominantly American Christians. So number one, if they're targeting the Jews, they're coming for you next and your kids next. And so what do we have to do? We stand with the Jewish community. We stand with Israel. We protect and defend each other. We share military. We share intelligence, because we understand that the world hates our values. The world hates our values.
I think that these 2 stories, the foiled plot in LA, as well as the horrific terror attack in Australia, they tear down 2 narratives right here. And one is one, Logan, that we talked about earlier this morning when you have been saying, in Australia, this should take away the notion that it's anti-Israel because these are Jews living in Australia. But at the same time,
Israel as you can get.
At the same time, I think it should tear down the narrative.
By the way, we're welcome into countries like South Africa and Australia after and during the Nazis and the Holocaust, and they were welcomed in because those were countries that needed smart immigrants for their economies, and now they are turning on those that they welcome in during and after an atrocity, and they're turning on them, and they have been turning on them in the streets in protest, thinking that those protests would not turn into these violent acts. I don't know how many times we have to first see 300,000 white people take to the streets with pro-Palestinian flags, like morons, with Hamas flags, especially some of these communities that would be literally executed in the street because of their other beliefs. And then a few months later, a few days later, there is an act of terrorism.
But also to that point, while it tears down that one narrative, it also tears down the narrative that those of us on the right that are concerned about the way the anti-Semitism has risen and the way that the left has co-opted the Palestinian cause, it's not Islamophobia as the left wants to label it. It is saying that there is an ideology that has developed over thousands of years in Islam, but is now co-opted by the left. It's not about being anti-Islamic. It is about saying this toxic ideology that is found in some pockets of Islam and also very prevalent in the American left is anti-Jewish. It is anti the principles of the United States. It is anti the First Amendment, something that we are talking about this week with the Raise Your Voice Week. That is what we are concerned about. It's not the fact that these people a lot of times end up being Islamic, because that is where that ideology festered for a while. It is grown and spread out, and it's not just what they would say is Islamophobia. It is going after an ideology wherever it comes that is anti-American.
I mean, the majority of Muslims in the world are also, unfortunately, victims of this ideology, of this terror, but they're not the loudest voices. They aren't the leaders usually in their countries. Some countries have moved that way. When we saw Egypt quickly have that time with the Muslim Brotherhood, how long did that last? Till they said, you know what, let's just have the military back.
Sadly, that's true on the right as well. It's like
But
these
this
voices
is-
aren't the loudest, aren't the most prominent, or they're not the majority, but they are some of the loudest voices that are coming out.
One of my good friends, who's Congressman Jared Moskowitz for Fraternity Brothers, I think he's going to be on the broadcast tomorrow, but we were texting last night, and he said it on Bill Maher. I mean, so this is not me putting words in his mouth. He said, for the left, unfortunately, it's like already taken over.
Yeah.
For the right, he's like, you guys have a chance.
You have a chance to stop
to stop it. And that's why I'm not saying people don't have the right to speak their minds, even in things I totally disagree with. But when it gets to the level of calling on violence on people or hatred of people, it's not even hate speech. I'm talking about incitement. That's different than free speech. It's something we always talk about. It is a fine line. But you know what? We don't have to turn it on. And you know what? What you really need to do is talk to your kids, because that's the people who are turning on.
With this individual, the son, who worked as a bricklayer in this father-son terrorist duo, he, in October of 2019, was examined for 6 months by the Australian Security Intelligence Organization because of his ties to others.
Right.
And so they were seeing if he was involved with an Islamic State cell. After 6 months, they concluded that there was no indication of any ongoing threat of him engaging in violence. That was 2019,
That's
October.
a long time ago.
6 years
So
ago.
for 6 months, they observed him. But obviously, he had been hanging around with people that were suspect to the Australian officials.
He didn't take actions that could lead to necessarily arrest. Now, that would be different than with what happened in Los Angeles. Okay, so kind of show that too. They were watching these left-wing groups, and they got to the level where they were starting to test explosive devices. They knew somehow had infiltrated, knew that they had a plan.
Radicalization can be radicalization in any ways.
Yes, but once you start planning an attack, is when the arrest usually hopefully occurs before you've carried out the attack. Hanging around some people who might not be great will get you maybe on a watch list that you might even not even know about.
Just being monitored, essentially.
But if then that kind of dissipates, and then it's years later. I mean, think about the time period there. You're talking about, what, 6 years? 6 years from probably being radicalized. Think about the idea too of a father taking his son to known death,
right,
to kill children and women and families, and thinking that's...
No, you're likely not making it out either.
No, and tells you how radical that ideology is, that if you have children, to think about that.